The moment the plane doors sealed shut, Captain Michael Grant felt it, an icy breath down his spine, a flash of blinding white, and then silence. In his mind, he saw the cockpit darken, oxygen masks dangle uselessly, and a scream that never escaped his throat. The altimeter spun wildly. Outside, a shadow swallowed the wings. When he blinked, everything was normal again, but the dread stayed, pulsing behind his eyes. The sun was just beginning to rise over Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, casting a soft amber glow across the tarmac. Inside the cockpit of Flight 279, Captain Michael Grant sat motionless, staring at the instrument panel like it had just betrayed him. The hum of the APU was steady, the checklists were clean, and everything appeared fine. But that wasn't what he had seen. His hand still trembled slightly as he reached for his headset. "Pre-flight complete," said First Officer Dana Chen, 33, sharp and composed, her brown eyes scanning the same panel he could barely look at. "Ready when you are, Captain." Michael hesitated, swallowing the dryness in his throat. He was known for his poise, his unshakable calm, but now, every flicker of light, every beep from the overhead panel seemed exaggerated, too loud, too sharp. Something wasn't right. But how do you explain a feeling like that? A premonition with no evidence, no error code? "Dana," he said quietly, adjusting his seatbelt, "do you ever get a bad feeling about a flight?" She turned, eyebrows raised, offering a light chuckle. "You mean like turbulence or passengers with emotional support peacocks?" He managed a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I mean something worse. Like a feeling in your gut. That something's off before you even leave the ground." Dana studied him for a moment. "Honestly? Once or twice. But nothing ever happened." Michael nodded, his fingers tapping anxiously against the yoke. A low vibration came through the floor, normal engine pressure building. But to him, it felt like a warning, like the earth itself wanted to hold the plane down. They pushed back from the gate. Atlanta Tower cleared them to taxi. The airport buzzed with routine motion, fuel trucks retreating, jetways retracting, passengers peering through the windows with the vacant hope that travel brings. It all looked normal. Too normal. As they approached the runway, Michael looked out over the wing. For a split second, it shimmered, not physically, but in his mind, as though it were fading out of phase with reality. The image of the shadow devouring the aircraft returned. Not a malfunction. Not a bird strike. Just absence. A kind of emptiness that swallowed metal and memory alike. "I need to request a route change," he said suddenly into the radio. Dana blinked. "What?" This corridor doesn't feel right." He toggled the switch again. "Atlanta Center, this is Flight 279 requesting deviation from the standard flight path to Frankfurt. We'd like to reroute over the Great Lakes instead of Newfoundland airspace." A pause. Then static. "Flight 279, negative on reroute. Weather patterns show heavy turbulence over the Great Lakes. Newfoundland corridor remains optimal." Michael's pulse quickened. He could feel Dana watching him now, confused, concerned. "You sure you're all right, Captain?" He inhaled slowly. "I just have a feeling. And I trust those more than forecasts." They lifted into the air at 7:42 a.m. The wheels retracted. The city slipped away behind them. Altitude 15,000. Climb was smooth. The passengers were settling in. The autopilot took over. And still, the feeling lingered, something was following them. Not on the radar. Not in the clouds. Something deeper. "Michael?" Dana's voice was softer now. "You keep rubbing your chest." He looked down. His fingers were pressed over his heart. The same place he'd felt that pulse of cold in the vision. "It's nothing. But then it hit again. Not a jolt. Not a failure. A silence. Total, pure, absolute silence. The kind of silence you never hear in a machine. Even with noise cancelling, there's always something, fans, pressure equalization, hums. But now, nothing. For 2 seconds, everything fell away. His ears heard nothing. The screens dimmed for just a blink, and when they returned, the clock had skipped. 7:47. 7:49. No 7:48. What was that? Dana asked, frowning. Did the avionics flicker? Michael didn't respond. His hands were already gripping the controls. He disengaged autopilot. We're descending to FL 280. Manual control. Wait, why? Trust me. Dana looked alarmed but nodded. Roger. Contacting ATC. Michael eased the plane down. He didn't know why. He just knew that in his vision, the plane had been at cruising altitude when the shadow came. Maybe if they stayed lower. But he could feel it. Like a scent you can't place. Like electricity in the air before a lightning strike. The danger wasn't ahead, it was around them. And then, from the galley, came the unmistakable sound of a tray clattering to the floor. A small thing. Insignificant. Except, no turbulence. No movement. Michael turned his head slowly, unease crawling up his neck. Cabin crew, report, Dana called into the intercom. No response. Cabin crew. Again, static. They waited. Still nothing. And then, a voice. Not over the radio. But close. Too close. She never gets off the plane, it whispered. Michael spun around. The cockpit was empty except for Dana. What did you say? He asked. Dana blinked. I didn't say anything. His breath caught in his throat. It was beginning. The cockpit lights dimmed to their normal cruise level, but to Captain Michael Grant, the air inside felt colder, thinner. First Officer Dana Chen had resumed contact with ATC, but her voice was tighter now, clipped at the edges. Both pilots avoided eye contact, as if acknowledging their shared discomfort would make it real. Flight 279, level at FL 280, Dana reported calmly. Copy that, came the tower's reply, but even that sounded distant. As though the voice came from a different time, not just a different place. Michael sat back, the flight manual open before him but unread. He wasn't thinking about avionics anymore. He was thinking about the whisper. She never gets off the plane. He hadn't imagined it. He couldn't have. The words hadn't just been heard, they had landed inside him, like ice sinking through bone. I'm going to check the cabin, he said abruptly, unclipping his harness. Dana frowned. That's unusual. I know. Something doesn't feel right. Just keep her steady. He opened the cockpit door slowly, as if expecting someone, or something, on the other side. The main cabin lights were dimmed. Most passengers were reading, dozing, or tapping at screens. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. The sound of the engine seemed muffled, like hearing through water. The overhead lights flickered once. A child looked up from her seat, frowned at him, then hid her face in her mother's shoulder. He made his way down the aisle. A flight attendant stood near the galley, pale and stiff. You all right, Andrea? He asked. She nodded too quickly. Yes, Captain. Just a little dizzy. Thought I saw someone, never mind. He paused. You saw someone what? Andrea's lips parted, then closed. A woman, I think. Walking toward the cockpit. But when I looked again, she was gone. No one was in the aisle. Michael glanced behind him. Empty. Do you remember what she looked like? Andrea hesitated. She was wearing something outdated. Like a wool coat. No shoes. And her hair was wet. Michael's throat tightened. Wet. He walked back up the aisle. Slowly. Listening. A cough here. A seatbelt click there. Nothing unusual. But he could feel it. There was a presence aboard this plane. Not human. Not physical. But real. As real as the shadow he'd seen in the vision. He reached the last row and stood still, listening. Then he heard it. From the lavatory. The sound of water dripping. Plink, plink. Plink. But the sinks on board were dry. And that sound, it wasn't a faucet. It was, heavier. Like water falling from cloth. Dripping onto metal. He knocked gently. Occupied, he asked. No answer. He unlocked the maintenance latch, standard protocol in emergencies, and pushed the door open slowly. Empty. No one inside. But the mirror was fogged. And across it, written in a streak of moisture, were words no one could explain, I was here. I never left. His breath caught. The temperature felt several degrees lower inside that lavatory. He stepped back and shut the door. The drip stopped. Returning to the cockpit, he found Dana with her headset off, staring ahead. Did something happen while I was gone? He asked. She didn't answer at first. Then, we lost contact with ATC for 3 minutes. I tried multiple frequencies. Then it came back like nothing had happened. But Michael, the time on the display, it jumped forward again. By 2 minutes. Michael sank into his seat. I think we're skipping time, he muttered. Dana gave him a look of disbelief, but said nothing. The instruments were stable. No alarms. No anomalies. Yet both pilots knew that wasn't reassuring anymore. I think something is on this plane, Michael said quietly. Dana turned slowly. What do you mean something? I don't know. A presence. A force. It's not a mechanical failure, it's a distortion. Of time, of perception. Dana shook her head. Michael, this sounds like insanity, he finished. Maybe. But I saw something in the lavatory. Writing. And a passenger that wasn't real. There was a beat of silence. Then Dana whispered, I saw her too. Michael looked at her sharply. In my dream last night, she said, voice shaking. Before this flight. I didn't think anything of it. A woman, soaked in water. Sitting in 32B. But no one bought that seat. They checked the manifest. Sure enough, 32B was unassigned. Michael opened the camera view of the cabin on the cockpit monitor. Zoomed in. Seat 32B. Empty. Until the monitor flickered. Just once. And in that frame, just that flicker, a pale figure sat there. Not looking forward. But looking at the camera. Michael closed the monitor. What if, he began, voice barely a whisper, we're not flying away from the danger, what if we're flying toward it? Dana stared ahead, the sky outside now an endless field of silver clouds. We need to land, she said. Michael nodded. But the radio, now alive again, crackled with new instructions. Flight 279, maintain course and altitude. Do not deviate. All alternate landing fields are currently unavailable. Michael's hand hovered over the frequency dial. Because the voice on the other end? It didn't sound like air traffic control anymore. The sky beyond the windshield had changed. It was subtle at first. The clouds no longer moved, they hovered, frozen like a photograph. The horizon had lost its curve. The stars above, normally invisible at cruising altitude during daylight, now twinkled faintly in a sky that was no longer blue or black, but a washed-out gray. It was as though the world had paused mid-thought, and Flight 279 was the only thing still moving. Dana touched the altimeter. The needles hadn't shifted in 10 minutes, despite subtle corrections in speed and engine output. The aircraft's systems claimed they were cruising normally, but the sensation in her body said otherwise. "I feel like we're not going anywhere," she muttered. Michael's hands were locked on the yoke. "I think we left normal airspace a long time ago." The silence between them was broken only by the subtle hum of the engines, too subtle, too even. It didn't feel like motion anymore. It felt like suspension. Like being held. Then the cabin lights flickered. Just once. Then again, longer. The emergency lighting clicked on momentarily, then stabilized. Michael grabbed the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor electrical fluctuation. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. We'll provide updates as we receive them." He turned off the mic and stared at Dana. "We didn't hit turbulence. Nothing's wrong with the weather radar. This shouldn't be happening." Dana said nothing. Her gaze was locked on the transponder panel, where the flight number had inexplicably changed. FL-279 had become FL-000. "Are we still visible to ground control?" she asked. Michael flipped to standby frequency. No signal. He rotated through 6 emergency channels. All dead. "Until you cannot descend," a voice said. Not through the headset. From behind them. They turned simultaneously. No one in the cockpit. No movement in the crew corridor. But both had heard it, clear, feminine, cold. Michael stood and opened the cockpit door. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. He stepped out slowly, scanning. The aisle lights glowed dim blue, like a midnight underwater world. Many passengers were asleep. Others stared blankly ahead, unblinking, their in-flight screens showing static. Then he saw her. Row 32B. A woman in a soaked wool coat. Long black hair, limp and dripping onto her shoulders. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers pale and folded neatly. She stared out the window. Michael walked toward her, slowly. Each footstep sounded muffled, like walking through thick fog. He reached the row. 32A, empty. 32C, empty. But 32B. Also empty. The woman was gone. Yet the seat was soaked. He reached out and touched the fabric. Wet. Cold. There was something tucked in the magazine pocket. A folded boarding pass. No barcode. No airline name. Just one line printed in black. Flight 000, final boarding. Michael backed away, heart pounding. He turned, and the child from earlier was standing behind him. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She looked up with glassy eyes. "She's not angry," the child whispered. "She's just waiting." "For what?" But the child only turned and walked back to her seat. Back in the cockpit, Dana was pale. "I saw her," she said as he returned. She stood right outside the cockpit door. No knock. Just stood there. Watching. Then vanished. Michael handed her the boarding slip. Dana read it in silence. Her fingers trembled. "We're on a flight that's not supposed to land," he said. "Maybe not supposed to end." Dana looked at the screen. "We're not even on the map anymore." The navigation system showed an empty grid. No cities. No coordinates. Just blank sky and a blinking icon labeled, "Lost." Michael's hands tightened on the yoke. "We're descending." "Michael, we were told not to." "I don't care who said it. If we're being hijacked by something not human, then I'd rather crash than drift endlessly. He initiated a controlled descent. The engines groaned. The control yoke resisted, stiffening unnaturally. Then the plane shuddered. Lights blinked violently. The interior dimmed. Warning alarms sounded, but the messages were unreadable. Dana's screen showed flashing letters, returned. Michael's screen showed, to her. The windshield began to frost over, on the inside. He fought the controls, but the plane pulled left on its own. Then the cockpit door creaked open again, though locked. A gust of freezing air swept in. They turned. The woman was inside. Soaked. Still. Face obscured by her hair. Michael stared, unable to speak. Her voice was like falling water. She never gets off. But you can. Then, she was gone. And the plane leveled out. Altitude, 28,000 feet. All systems back online. Dana gasped. What just happened? Michael stared at the empty sky. She gave us a choice. Just one. What choice? To land. Dana hesitated. Then why didn't we? The radio crackled again. Flight 279, cleared direct to final. Prepare for descent. The voice was normal. Almost too normal. Michael swallowed. Who gave us that clearance? The voice didn't answer. And in the seat map behind them, row 32B was empty. But water was seeping across the carpet. The descent began without permission. Michael's hands never touched the throttle. The controls eased forward on their own, silently engaging as if guided by an invisible co-pilot. Altitude slipped away, 28,000 feet, 26,000. 24,500. Dana stared at the instruments. Autopilots disengaged. Manual controls, not responding. The engine hum had changed pitch. Lower. Hollow. Like it echoed inside a vast, unseen cavern. Outside, the clouds were no longer cotton-like wisps. They swirled unnaturally, slow and thick, like smoke underwater. They didn't move past the wings. They clung to them. Michael grabbed the radio. Approach control, this is Flight 279 requesting vector confirmation. Do you read? Silence. Then static. Then a voice, far off, calm, and unfamiliar. Altitude is not a choice. It is a memory. Dana froze. I don't think we're descending into airspace, she whispered. I think we're descending into something else. The temperature in the cockpit dropped sharply. Frost crawled across the glass from the inside out, like ice tracing its own path. Michael could see his breath now, shallow, rapid. The air smelled faintly metallic, like cold steel and burnt ozone. Then a new sound filled the cockpit, dripping. He looked down. Water pooled at his feet. Soaked through the floor. Coming from nowhere. Dana wiped the frost from her screen. We're over water. But there was no ocean in this sector. They were hundreds of miles inland. Michael leaned closer. Look at the reflection. On the inky surface of the screen, their reflection stared back, only wrong. Dana's image was smiling unnaturally. Michael's eyes were closed in his reflection, though they were wide open in real life. A sharp knock echoed from the rear of the cockpit. Then another. Michael stood, heart thundering, and opened the cockpit door. The corridor beyond was pitch black. The plane's lights had shut off entirely, except for a thin line of red glowing at floor level, leading toward the tail. He took a flashlight and moved slowly. As he passed row after row, he noticed the passengers were motionless. Not asleep. Not unconscious. Just, still. As if they were wax figures frozen in mid-flight. A baby's bottle hung in the air between a mother's fingers, floating. A businessman's laptop blinked with the word recalculating, in red letters. Near the galley, a familiar figure stood facing the lavatory mirror. The woman. Hair dripping, coat soaked, skin pale blue-gray like she'd never known warmth. Michael hesitated, but she did not move. He took a cautious step forward. "What do you want?" he asked. She turned, revealing her face fully for the first time. It was calm. Kind. But ancient. "I don't want," she said. "I wait. For them. For you." Michael's throat tightened. "Why us?" She tilted her head slightly. "Because you fly the same path. Over and over. Always avoiding the fall. But every flight must land eventually." Dana's voice crackled in his headset. "Michael, get back here. We have a situation." He turned back. The woman was gone. He ran. Back in the cockpit, Dana's eyes were fixed on the windshield. There was something ahead. A shape. Large. Impossible. It looked like an airport, floating in the clouds. A glowing grid of lights, hovering mid-air, anchored to nothing. The runway extended forward, stretching out into emptiness like an invitation into oblivion. Michael blinked. "That's not in any database." "It's not on Earth," Dana muttered. "And the autopilot is aligning with it." He tried to override it. No response. The plane banked gently, smoothly guiding itself into approach position. Michael's hands trembled. "This is it." Dana nodded. "She said we could get off." The seatbelt sign dinged. A voice echoed overhead, not theirs. "Prepare for final descent." In the cabin, passengers stirred for the first time. Some looked around confused. Others simply smiled faintly, as though they had known all along. Michael whispered, "What if we land?" Dana answered, "Then we join them." He reached down, disconnected the main autopilot wiring manually, a near impossible move mid-flight. The plane lurched. The false airport vanished like smoke. Alarms screamed. Altitude dropped fast. Michael gripped the controls. "I can take us down. Somewhere real. I saw a strip back west, maybe we can divert." Then the cockpit lights shut off completely. Total darkness. One last whisper filled the space, from everywhere and nowhere, "You were never meant to leave." And in that final moment, Michael saw something through the darkness outside, the reflection of Flight 279, eternally circling in the clouds above a sea that never touched ground. No one knew when the plane stopped falling. There was no crash, no impact. Just stillness. Silence bloomed like fog inside the cockpit. The gauges were frozen mid-read. The engines had ceased their whirring hum. No more radio static. No more distant voices. Just that low, humming nothing, like the quiet you hear deep underwater, where time doesn't reach. Michael opened his eyes. He was still in the pilot's seat. But something had changed. The windshield now showed a vast horizon of pale gray. No clouds. No sun. No sky. Just endless nothingness. Dana sat beside him, blinking slowly, unsure. "Did we land?" Michael's voice was hoarse. "There's no ground." Outside, the wings of the plane no longer moved. They were stretched out stiffly as if preserved in place. Beyond them, the world looked painted, no wind, no stars, just pause. He unbuckled his harness and rose to inspect the cabin once more. The corridor lights flickered faintly, casting a red glow that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. It wasn't the plane's emergency system. It was something else, older. The passengers were all awake now. Sitting upright. Eyes open. Smiling. As if they understood something Michael and Dana did not. Michael stepped carefully down the aisle, his footsteps muffled, weightless. Each row seemed identical, not just similar, but repeated. Like time had looped itself around this space. At row 27, he stopped. There, sitting in seat A, was himself. Eyes closed. Peaceful. Motionless. Dana gasped behind him. "What is this?" Michael turned, voice cracking. Maybe this already happened." He ran toward the emergency door. It opened effortlessly. But outside, there was no wind. No suction. Just still air. And then he saw it, another plane. Not far, maybe a few hundred meters away. Identical. Suspended in the air like a museum model. And inside the cockpit. Another version of him and Dana. Trapped. Repeating. A dozen such planes hovered nearby, some partially translucent, some faded like memories. All suspended, unmoving. The intercom clicked on. It wasn't their voice. It was hers. The woman from the reflection. "You tried. You always do. But this flight is not meant to end. It is meant to remind." Michael shouted, "Remind who?" Silence. Then a whisper, barely audible, "You." Behind him, the aisle lights changed to blue. A faint music played. The kind that loops endlessly before boarding, soft jazz, cheerful and sterile. The kind that no one remembers, even while it plays. Dana whispered, "We're part of the route now." Michael closed his eyes. He felt weightless. Like memory shedding itself. He walked back to the cockpit. Sat down. Outside the window, stars had begun to appear in the endless gray, not real stars, but reflections of cabin lights, mirroring forever. A gentle ding signaled overhead. Seatbelt sign on. Passengers relaxed. Smiles returned. Somewhere in the back, the woman moved through the aisle, adjusting headrests, whispering names they didn't know anymore. Michael didn't speak. He stared into the void ahead. The instruments blinked once more, systems reinitializing. Altitude, 36,000 feet. Speed, 490 knots. Route, CYVR, JFK. Time to arrival, 4 hours, 11 minutes. A voice echoed through the cabin once more. Michael's voice. Recorded. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 279. We're expecting a smooth flight today." His hand gripped the yoke. He smiled faintly. Because there was no turbulence. There never was. And there never would be. Because on this flight, there was no arrival. Only the journey. Over and over. A premonition fulfilled not in fire or explosion, but in the slow erasure of identity, of time, of destination. A whisper carried on the artificial air, "Some passengers never land." The screen faded to black. Then one final message appeared, Flight 279. Status, in transit. Somewhere in the skies between Canada and the United States, there is a silent coordinate not found on any map. A point where radars don't reach, where time does not move forward. A suspended space, beyond the reach of physics or logic, where only premonitions persist, and where Flight 279 still crosses the sky. JFK Airport's control tower never recorded the plane's landing. No alarms were triggered. No distress calls detected. For tracking systems, the Boeing 777 simply remains en route. Estimated time of arrival, 4 hours and 11 minutes. That was the last information transmitted automatically. Every day, someone from the air traffic team tries to locate the flight. Veteran pilots, ground technicians, meteorologists, all say the aircraft should have landed days ago. But it still appears on the radar, at 36,000 feet altitude. Fixed. Stable. Always with the same time to land, as if the clock had stopped inside it. And no one dares to remove it from the system. Because the truth is, some routes never end. They repeat. And there are records. Old ones. Historical. Other flights that disappeared the same way, all with unexplained small failures, all led by professionals beyond suspicion, all described by their families as people who seemed different in their last days. More introspective. More sensitive to sounds, smells, lights. They all had spoken about dreams of falling. Premonitions. Warnings no one took seriously. Just like Captain Michael Reeves. An honest man. Rational. Trained to handle real turbulence, but completely unprepared for the invisible winds of fate. His decisions were logical. Correct. But what he faced was not a technical failure or sabotage. It was a cycle. A fate wrapped in repetition. A lesson disguised as routine. His mistake was not ignoring the premonition. It was believing he could escape it. Because some warnings aren't meant to be avoided, but fulfilled. And when he saw himself in seat 27A, it wasn't just a duplicate. It was the reflection of the moment he surrendered. The exact point where he stopped fighting. Where he understood the flight was not physical. It was symbolic. It was the path between what was and what has yet to end. In the airport lobby, a digital panel still shows, Flight 279, delayed. No one questions it. Rushed passengers pass by it every day. No one pays attention. But sometimes, a child stares fixedly. Or an elderly person stops in front of it for long seconds. And in their eyes, something glimmers, as if they already know. As if they've already been there. Hallway 13 in the international area, where Flight 279 should depart again, remains closed. But at night, a low turbine sound is heard by employees. A light turns on by itself. A subtle scent of coffee and fuel fills the air. And on rare occasions, an announcement echoes over the empty speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, boarding for Flight 279 is about to begin. But there is no plane. No gate. No line. Only the sound. Only the suggestion. And the question whispered between walls and electric wires, have you also dreamed of the flight? The screen darkens. The ambient music returns, the one no one notices, but that always plays before boarding. The camera slowly moves away from an empty terminal, lit by a bluish artificial light. And far in the background, on a forgotten screen, the final notification reappears, Flight 279, in transit. Forever.